In this action-packed episode, wiring, suspension, big brakes, and flying sparks. Let's go! In our last episode, we gave our suspension a few much-needed upgrades, bolted in our driveline, routed our fuel lines, and made some good progress on our big wiring job. Now it's time to keep plugging away on the wiring, finish installing the suspension, make some brake upgrades, and begin work on our custom exhaust that will truly put the thunder in Project Thunderbolt. Let's get to work. When we left off last time, there was a big pile of wires on the floor of the Miata. Included in this bird's nest is the drive-by-wire gas pedal wiring, speedometer wires, temperature and oil pressure gauge signal wires, fuel pump lead, tax signal wire, ECU outputs, and others. The job to be done now is to slowly work each wire by sending it where it belongs and connecting it for good. Once I had the batch of wires that run behind the HVAC box routed properly, I bolted that down for good. Now I can plug in the gas pedal. I ran the wideband air-fuel ratio signal wire through this stock firewall grommet. Looks pretty good, but there's something missing. Oh yeah, much better. The next couple hours was dedicated to wiring the speedometer. I love the idea of adapting all the stock gauges to work with our new engine, but in any drivetrain conversion, making the factory speedometer work properly can be tricky. Some folks solve this problem by running an aftermarket speedometer, but that doesn't work for me. Thankfully, Flying Miata has already blazed this trail and describes how to make this work in their free-to-download wiring manual. The main ingredient is this signal interface from Dakota Digital that accepts the speed sensor from the T56 Magnum transmission and converts that to a signal that our stock Miata speedometer can use. A little resistor is also needed, but it's all worth it to have a completely stock-appearing interior and working speedometer. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm not covering every step of the wiring process, as that has already been done very well by the folks at Flying Miata in their wiring guide. Instead, I wanted to show some of the steps and give you a feel for the process. This was slow, deliberate work that at times felt like it may never end. It required total concentration and careful thinking about wire placement, routing, and protection. I found over the years that slowing myself down a bit when tackling any wiring job will help ensure the work is accurate and trouble-free for the life of the car. After running the fuel pump signal wire from the GM harness to the Mazda fuel pump assembly and securing those wires, it was time to reinstall this shelf that covers and protects them. Since spraying lizard skin back here would have been difficult, I used Summit Racing's ultra heat and sound deadening mats to keep things cool and quiet. Next, I did a couple quick tests to make sure everything electrical was working properly. That all checked out, so back on goes the dash. While the majority of the wiring is now complete, we still have a little more wiring to do later, like installing the battery for good, securing the transmission wires, and routing and plugging in these oxygen sensor wires. With the wiring in place, it's time to plumb the cooling system. I used a variety of parts for this job, starting with Flying Miata's cooling kit, which includes a variety of heater hoses and adapters, an upper and lower radiator hose, and high-quality heater hose clamps. In addition to this kit, I added some formed and straight sections of hose for our LS steam port and coolant overflow line, and some additional clamps. Let's get to it. The first job is to install the heater hoses. Space is tight and they have a long way to go to get from the Miata's firewall to the front of the engine, so plenty of time and patience is required. Well, it's definitely a tight fit back there. A lot of things competing for space up against the firewall, but we'll just trim these hoses until we can get them all to fit. Until then, let me play you the song of my people. With the firewall side hoses trimmed to fit, I added some hose clamps and moved to the front of the engine where they connect. I used some protective sleeve over the rubber hoses to keep them safe from heat and chafing. Once I had the heater core side and engine side in place, I trimmed the hoses to fit in the middle, added the adapters, and then clamped them down for good. Next up were the radiator hoses. When it comes to the critical job of cooling your all-aluminum high-powered engine, it's important to use high-quality hoses and clamps, as a cheap clamp letting loose could ruin your day. I've used these lined stainless steel clamps from Ideal for many years, and they always work great. After a little trimming, here's the upper radiator hose in place and ready to go. I did the same for the lower hose, which fit great after a little trimming also. Next, I picked up some high-quality hose that will be routed from our LS engine's steam port over to the steam port inlet on the radiator. After connecting that, I clamped it down and secured it to the upper radiator hose to keep it away from the serpentine belt. Now I can reinstall the stock Mazda coolant overflow jug. Use old jug? No, not use old jug. Use new jug. With that in place, I used a preformed hose to route from the overflow jug to the radiator. While we're on the subject of plumbing, it was a good time to connect and tighten up our power steering lines for good too. Okay, I need a break. Remember how our headlights looked when I first got this car? They had these covers on them. Now I thought they would grow on me, but they didn't. They were just stuck on with double-sided tape, so after using some dental floss to remove them and polish to get rid of any remaining residue, here's how they turned out. Oh yeah, I like that much better. Let's bolt them on. Our next task is to bolt in these chassis braces that I picked up from Flying Miata. They mount under the front fenders and help keep the front end from twisting from impacts and cornering loads, which leads to more precise handling and a reduction in cowl shake. They're made of thick steel and are powder coated in an eye-popping shade of green. Although these things disappear behind your fenders, I just wasn't feeling that green and gave them a nice thick coating of titanium gray metallic paint. Flying Miata installs these braces on all their turnkey V8 Miata builds, and they're a great, affordable way to stiffen up any Miata's chassis. Since our fenders are already off, we've got a good head start on the installation process. Using the included hardware, we begin bolting them up and drilling the necessary holes as explained in the instructions. Next, we tighten up all the hardware and take a moment to admire our work. While we're on the subject of braces, the Mazda Speed Miata comes from the factory with a nice strut tower brace. I'll be reusing this, but first I need to remove the factory PCV catch can lines from it. A couple cuts and some time sanding, and it's ready to be bolted back on a bit later. Now it's time to install the mass airflow sensor that came with our Chevy Performance engine controller setup into the Z06 air intake. Next, I installed the ZR1 air filter and then fit it all into place for good. Oh yeah, that'll work. Can you feel it? We're getting closer, folks. Alright, let's button up this suspension. First up is this stock Mazda Speed differential brace. I'm just snugging this in place at the moment, as we'll likely have to modify it a bit when it comes time to fit our exhaust. Next, I grabbed the assembled rear coilover and slid it into its new home. I'm just snugging these bolts down. I'll torque them for good once we have the full weight of the car resting on the suspension. With that all together, let's move to the front. First up are the control arms, followed by the hubs, and finally the front shocks. Once that's in place, we can reattach the ABS brackets and route the wires where they belong. The final step is to install our flying Miata V8 conversion front sway bar, which fit great and allows plenty of room for our V8 while providing better suspension performance. To make sure we've got plenty of woe to complement our go, a brake upgrade is definitely in order. Starting with the rear, I got my hands on a set of new rotors and Hawk HPS brake pads that I picked up from Summit Racing. For the fronts, I chose the V8 Roadsters Big Brake Kit. This is a direct bolt-on upgrade for any Miata. Just check out their website for more details. The kit includes everything you see here, starting with a set of Willwood 11 3/4 inch rotors, which are bolted to V8 Roadster's own CAD-designed rotor hats that are machined from a big chunk of 6061 T6 billet aluminum. Also included are a set of Willwood's Dynapro calipers, these beefy caliper brackets, braided stainless brake lines, Willwood's BP20 smart pads, all of the hardware needed, and a jug of Willwood's own brake fluid. Another great feature is that you can easily upgrade to the V8 Roadster's 4-wheel big brake kit at any time, so I very well may go that route someday. A well thought out kit like this will give you far superior braking while at the same time dropping significant unsprung weight. How much? Let's take a look. One side of the stock front brakes weighs in at a little over 23 pounds, while the V8 Roadster setup comes in at just a tick over 15 pounds. That's an honest 16 pounds of unsprung weight reduction for both front wheels, and that is excellent. Okay, let's bolt them on. First up, I installed the caliper brackets, which required a little trimming of the factory heat shield. After all the necessary cuts were made, I filed them down and protected them with some black spray paint. Once that dried, I bolted on the caliper brackets and torqued them to spec. Now it's time to clean up the new rotor and slide it onto the hub. I like to screw on a couple lug nuts by hand to keep the rotor in place. That looks good, plenty of clearance, and it spins freely. Back over on the bench, it's time to prepare the new calipers. They don't need much, just this brake line fitting and the brake pads. Now the caliper brake lines are attached to the factory lines and the caliper is bolted onto the bracket. With those torqued to spec, the brake line can be attached and we're all done until it's time to fill the brake system with fluid and bleed everything later on. Nice! Now it's time to give Thunderbolt its signature sound. This is the first time I've ever fabricated a complete clean sheet V8 exhaust system, and I've really been looking forward to this part of the project. I have a specific sound and fit in mind and spent months thinking about the parts I would need to accomplish this. Today we'll be building the front section. The foundation of our exhaust is this universal rod builder exhaust kit from Summit Racing. It comes complete with the building blocks needed to fab up a great custom exhaust. I chose the 2.5-inch aluminized piping, and in the box you get 4 4-foot long straight sections, 4 180-degree mandrel bends, 4 90-degree mandrel bends, and 4 45-degree mandrel bends. I was really impressed with the quality and value of this kit. Next, I chose Summit Racing's Universal 2.5-inch X-Pipe kit. In case you aren't familiar with them, X-Type dual exhausts help engines make more power by reducing exhaust reversion and scavenging cylinders better, which counter the uneven exhaust pulses of a V8's firing order. Using this kit, we'll be able to fabricate a custom X-Pipe that will fit like a glove under the LS3 Miata. In the box you get the prefabricated X section, 4 45-degree mandrel bent sections of aluminized tubing, and heavy-duty clamps, although we'll be welding this one together. In addition to the piping and X-Pipe kits, I chose a handful of components to round out the front section of the exhaust. First, we have these 2.5-inch Summit Racing flex joint pipes, which are designed to allow for engine movement and vibration. They feature a stainless steel flexible joint and braided cover for great durability. Next, I chose these 2.5-inch Summit Racing V-band exhaust clamps. They're made from quality stainless steel and are designed to be strong and reliable. Next, I picked up a set of these 2.5-inch Vibrant Performance bottle-style resonators, which are designed to dampen unwanted exhaust noise without restricting flow. They feature a straight-through perforated core, stainless steel construction, and come in a range of different sizes. This one is 12 inches overall and 4 inches around. Also, we need to incorporate the Chevrolet Performance O2 sensor mounting bosses that came with our engine management kit, and the mounting boss for our Innovate wideband air fuel sensor. Alright, let's get to it. My first step was to really study the undercarriage and begin to visualize where these pieces and parts could go. The Flying Miata headers give us a great head start, but I still spent hours looking, measuring, and thinking about placement. I mean, all I want is good performance, excellent drone-free sound, long-term reliability, and maximum ground clearance. Yeah, piece of cake, right? You know, I've done lots of 4-cylinder exhausts over the years, And they're a lot more straightforward. You know, you got one pipe to deal with, and routing it is pretty simple. There's usually a real clear-cut spot for it. And you know, this car was designed for one exhaust pipe as well. So now we're fitting twice as much exhaust stuff under here than Mazda intended. But so doing that, I usually, you know, with 4 cylinders, I usually just started front to back. And I've done that with other cars I've built exhausts on too. But for some reason, you know, with the cross member and this X pipe in play, I wanted to start here in the middle and size up this X pipe first, and then get a feel of what needs to connect to it, and then how much room I have in the tunnel, and then going backwards. So it just seemed like a logical place to start was this X pipe, but so we'll see how it goes. While having a lift is a huge help in building a system like this compared to doing it on your back, which I've done before, a simple pole jack is also required to serve as an extra set of hands. Here you can see the pole jack helping out as I continued work on the X-pipe placement in relation to the crossmember and the flying Miata exhaust hanger bracket. Alright, enough noodling. Let's make some sparks. Alright, so I know it doesn't look like we've made much progress here, but I've actually been working on the angles and you know, just the fit of this X-pipe for quite a while, and how the different legs come out of it. And I'm feeling pretty good about it, you know, how it's all fitting in the tunnel. I might want to come up a little here in the back. But right now, you know, I'm looking where I can place these resonators. I'm thinking somewhere in this neighborhood. So that's my next task. Once I'm happy with it from here, you know, from the headers back, then I can start to think, you know, where these can go, and then we'll be on our way to the mufflers in the back. Okay, I'm happy with the placement of everything. It's time to commit and tack weld it all in place. With all those pipes tacked, let's keep working our way on back. While those cool off, let's head up front and find a place for these O2 sensor mounting bosses. Generally, you want your sensors between the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock position to keep them safe from condensation. Also, be sure to mount them in a spot where they can be easily serviced. Check your installation manual, as there are a variety of mounting requirements that need to be met for these to function properly. Alright, this spot looks good.
Like a pretty good spot right there.
Okay, here's a look at our front section. All we need to do now is take it down and weld it up for good. First, we'll focus on fitting the O2 sensor mounts. Now it's time to seal up all the joints that we tack welded earlier. After those welds cooled, I cleaned them up a bit and sprayed on a few coats of Duplicolor low gloss black high heat engine enamel. I think we're off to a good start here. To test the fit and get it set in place for fabricating the rest of the exhaust, I threaded in the oxygen sensors and bolted our new front section in place. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Summit Racing for helping to make this video series possible. If you enjoy these videos, please let them know on Facebook or Twitter. I would really appreciate it. Thank you also to V8 Roadsters and the folks at Flying Miata for their great products and fast technical help. Building a V8 powered Miata is much easier when you've got folks like this on your team. In the next episode, we finish up our exhaust system and a bunch of other remaining tasks, and if everything goes well, we'll get a chance to hear this little beast run. For more pictures and details on this build, check out my website at v8mazda.com. So with that said, thanks again folks, we'll see you next time.